Hi, and welcome to Knitting with QueerJoe. Today we're going to talk about knitting charts. People love charts, people hate charts. However, if you're going to design knitting patterns, I highly recommend that you always include a chart in your knitting design pattern. And the reason is, if you plan on selling your pattern on a place like Ravelry, for instance, when people do searches for your pattern design, they can actually filter out any of those patterns that don't have charts or don't have line-by-line instructions. And so if your pattern has both, it's going to come up more in searches on Ravelry, and hopefully you'll sell more patterns that way. So I highly recommend it. With that being said, I'm going to talk about 3 different ways that you can relatively easily create charts. So most of my charts that I've used in my pattern designs, I use Excel spreadsheets. However, there's an online web-based software that's much better and has a lot more functionality called Stitch Fiddle that I'm going to highly recommend that you use. And then there's a third, it's actually a piece of software or an app that uses Stitch Mastery. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Excel just because it's not built for creating knit charts, and so there's quite a few things that you need to do. On the pro side of using Excel, if it's the software that you have access to, it's free and it's relatively user-friendly because it's a known quantity. People know how to use Excel. They know how to do copy and paste and things like that. There's things like copy and paste or creating borders around various stitches and things. It's relatively easy to do in formatting it. On the downside of it, it does require that you install a font if you want to use standard knit symbols on your charts. It also doesn't have an automatic key setup like the 2 other softwares I'm going to talk about does. So to have a key that defines what each symbol means, you're going to need to create that on your own. It also doesn't have the capacity to create line-by-line instructions automatically, and both the other 2 softwares do. So when you create a chart in either of the other softwares, it's going to automatically create line-by-line if you have the paid-for subscriptions to either of those 2 things. The other thing about Excel that makes it a little bit more difficult is it relies on certain advanced features, things like copy and paste special to create a picture of your grid. Otherwise, it will embed the actual spreadsheet into your Word document or whatever you're creating your pattern for. And you don't really want an embedded spreadsheet. You want to have a picture that you can modify and change around. So let's talk a little bit about Excel and a couple of the unique things to that you need to be able to do when you're creating a knit chart in Excel. So this is the actual chart that I used for there's actually 3 of these charts in 3 different sizes for the helical striped short row sock that I recently published. I use some of the standard symbols that you can get in most, but I had to create this entire key down here associated with it. The other thing you'll notice is you can't see the grid lines behind this, and that's because when you're generating an image from this, you don't want those grid lines. You only want the ones associated with your chart showing up. And so you have to delete all or not display the other symbols behind it. So if you're starting from scratch, a couple of things that you need to do is highlight the entire and change this. I like to change this to about 16 pixels wide and about 20 pixels tall. And that way it gives you an approximate ratio of what it looks like, what your actual knit stitches pixels look like. Also, if you know how many rows that you're going to be included, you can just start by typing in the first 2 sequential numbers. Highlight that, and that little square at the bottom with the highlighted numbers, if you just click and drag that down, it will actually automatically number your rows. And the other thing that is nice is this is all familiar functionality, so if you need to delete out columns, it's easy to highlight and delete those. But the other thing is, once you've installed that Stitch Mastery font, you need to highlight the entire space where your chart is going to reside, and then change the font to Stitch Mastery Dash. Once you've downloaded, it's a free font and you can download it and install it. If you've never installed a font before, I highly recommend that you do. Watch a video about it. It wasn't easy for me to install a font without, I'd never done it before. So once I do that, then I know that anytime I put in like a period, it's going to put in a purl stitch for me in this particular case. Or if I put in a 0, it's going to put in a knit two together, or some sort of decrease, center decrease type of thing. Once you have your, and the other nice thing is it has all the click and paste type of things. So you can just copy and paste in the same way that you do in an Excel spreadsheet. Once your entire chart is done, we're going to go down to 75% so we can see the entire chart. You'd go ahead and you'd create your key to that, and you could put your key over here or down below. But now you're going to want to copy and paste that into into your presumably Word document if you're working in Excel. But you actually need to click on the Show piece under View and take out grid lines, and then add your own grid lines by putting in all borders. So now I only have the grid lines associated with my chart and not the outer ones. So if I just copy that and then I go to my Word document, I can do a copy paste special and then actually pick PNG or picture. And that way, instead of an embedded worksheet, it actually has a fully movable image as opposed to it. Now this one happens to be locked in, but you could change it to centered or any other kind of thing that you wanted, since it's just a standard PNG image embedded now into your Word document. So that's a very quick overview of how I typically do spreadsheet chart diagrams. Let's take a look at the other two. So the first one I started using when I heard about it was because it was free, was Stitch Fiddle, and it's just stitchfiddle.com, and you create your own account for it. Now this is a paid for account, which I think is about $5. Let me take a look and see if I can tell you quickly. It's $5.50 a month. So I have it currently until the end of, in fact, October 25th, which is probably past by the time you're watching this, which is great. And typically, if you don't make that many charts, you can just pay $5.50 for, in essence, a one-time use of the chart, so you get it for an entire month. So if you take a look at, it will store your various charts. So I've done a few different ones. So let's take a look at the helical stripe chart in this one. One of the things that you notice is you have the option of using any of the standard stitch keys. If there's one that you don't have up here that you want, all you do is click on the +1, and under basic stitches, you can add any of those. So for instance, I wanted to use a purl through back of loop. I can add that. And if I decide that I want to use this for a wrap and turn, let's say instead, I can actually just double click on it. I can, let's change the background color so that we don't ruin it. Change the background color and the description. Instead of purl to back of loop, we're going to do wrap and turn. slip neck stitch, something like that. And you can have it be anything you want. And then you'll see down here in the key, it will show up in the, with the abbreviation that I used of wrap and turn and slip neck stitch, bring yarn forward, and so on. So you can change that to anything you want so that your key remains the same. The other nice thing about this particular software is, in addition to, like if I want a no stitch, I can just type it in here. You can click and drag all over and actually draw your stitches in. And each row, so you'll see here row 16, which currently is this one, it will say no stitch for 8, wrap and turn, knit 3. Now these you can export as written instructions and modify them in any way you want, which works out great. It's a particularly nice one. It will actually export to where's my, so you can download a JPG, for instance. And you'll see that this is the image that it downloaded, and you can just embed that with the key. So it's actually really quite a nice software. I like it very much. And even the free version is pretty good, so you can test it out and see whether you like it as well. And the last one we're going to look at is Stitch Mastery. It's a little bit more expensive in terms of, I think it's a $90 purchase fee for the application itself. At least it was for Windows, if I remember right. And so let's take a look and see what it takes to create a new chart. So the first thing it asks you to do is number of rows. Let's see if I can move this down. Yeah, I can. Number of rows. And so we're just going to do a 15 by 15 flat knitting. First row is right side row. It's not a brioche with a 2-pass type of thing. And it will actually create the blank chart for you. One of the things you'll see over here, so it's got our 15 by 15. It's currently only got wrong side knit, right side purl, so it only has one stitch in the key. But in the basic stitches, if we were to add a purl, you can just draw those in. And if you have a lot of no stitches, you can just click and drag and draw. One of the things I particularly like about this one is, in addition to, so now that I've chosen one of these, and they have a whole slew of different knit increases, purl increase stitches, and various other make ones and things like that down here. As you're creating this, it literally creates kind of an overview outline of what your chart is and what part you're looking at right now. So you can kind of see down here. Let me bring this up a little bit. You can see an outline of the chart that you're working on. You can also see the output text of a line-by-line instructions. And I also like the fact that since it's flat knitting, it numbers the first row over here, the second row starting over here, so you know exactly which row to start on and things like that, which I find to be incredibly useful. And one of the nice things I like about this is if you have a bunch of no stitches where you're not doing it, and you'd prefer to have the number closer to the end of the actual row, you can actually change under the edit option, hide no stitch edges. And when you do that, all those no stitches disappear and the row number comes in closer to the end. So especially in my short row heel that I did, that would have been incredibly useful. because in essence, the no stitches are on both sides of the short rows as I'm doing it. And so it's a particularly nice feature. Again, you can export any of this out to an image and or the actual text and make any modifications to that once it's out in your Word document before you publish your actual design. So those are the basic three softwares that I use in terms of making my charts. And again, I highly recommend that you do charts. Please feel free to ask any questions you have. I know these aren't exactly tutorials on how to use any of these for knit stitch charts. However, if you have any questions specific to those, I'm happy to answer any of those. And I much appreciate always when people either subscribe and or like my videos. So thank you all for doing that, and hopefully I'll see you next time at Knitting with QueerJoe. Thanks.